Good afternoon. My name is Agnieszka Hamera. I'm partner and tax advisor in PKF Poland. Welcome on PKF webinar, Startup and Develop Your Business in Poland. Thank you very much for your interest in our webinar. And according to our observation, Poland remains a good investment target for foreign investors. What is interesting, also the current pandemic situation did not significantly change investor decision in this regard. The aim of our webinar is to provide a potential investor with the most important information on the legal, tax and accounting aspects of running business in Poland. What legal form to choose? Where will be the best location for my company? What will be the cost of running business in Poland? Will it be possible to take advantage of tax benefits? There is only the sum of the questions that an investor must know the answer before making key decision to start a business. I hope that our webinar will be opportunity to collect some of this information, and as a part of further cooperation, we are ready to provide you with comprehensive professional support. First, maybe some most important information about our country, its size, position in Europe, and economic data. As you see, Poland is located in the heart of Europe, which makes it a perfect investment location for companies wishing to export products both to the east and to the west. As you see, Poland lies between the Baltic Sea in the north and Sudets and Carpathian in the south. Our next neighbors, it's in the north part, it's Russia and Lithuania, and at the east, it's Belarus and Ukraine. At the south, it's Slovakia and Czechia, and in the west, it's Germany. With administrative area about 312,000 square kilometers, Poland ranks 69th in the world and 9th in Europe. With nearly 38 million inhabitants, it is the 36th most popular country in the world and the 6th most popular country in the European Union. Poland is divided into the 16 provinces, consisting in total of 66 cities with district rights and 314 districts. Warsaw is the largest city and at the same time is the capital of Poland. Other larger cities are Kraków, Łódź, Wrocław, Poznań, Gdańsk and Szczecin. Investors can benefit from a strong economic relations with European zone as a part of EU common market. The stability of Polish economy makes it more resistant to economic crisis. Boasting over 20 years of stable GDP growth, the country provides a business-friendly environment to investor. In 2020, Poland's economic decline due to the coronavirus pandemic was 2.8%, much less than average recession in EU member states of 6.4%. This rather low decrease is due to the fact that Poland's economic results is less dependent on exports compared to the other Central European countries like Czech Republic, Hungary or Slovakia. At the same time, private consumption accounts for 58% of GDP, reducing the vulnerability of external shocks, as evidenced by avoidance of recession during 2009 credit crisis. In 2021, the economy is forecast to rebound by 3.8%, given the current surge of coronavirus infection can be contained and the vaccination process is rolled up in the time. PKF Poland. Why we decided to prepare such a webinar? As I mentioned, our goal was to present the most important information for the foreign investors. We are the firm which is a member of PKF International since 2020. So from this time, we have many occasions to support foreign clients with his decision before the starting business in Poland, but also during this providing this activity on our territory. As I mentioned, Poland has been operating on Polish market over 28 years and implementing 8 business lines. It's audit, tax advisory, legal advisory, also the consulting services, trainings, and of course, accounting services outsourcing. Annually, we provide services to approximately 1,500 customers, and our experience in support foreign companies in entering in Polish market is significant. Maybe a few words about today's agenda. As you see, the agenda of today's webinar has been divided into the legal, tax, and accounting parts. Each of them will be led by our experienced experts. If you have any questions that may arise during the webinar, please ask them in the chat. We will try to answer them in the last part of our webinar. On your screen, you will see also the button survey. Please put your information in this survey. For these people who decided to do it, we will send our material, and we will be happy to make a additional contact with you. A few words about our lectures. Myself, so my name is Agnieszka Hamera. Next part will be presented by Marta Juskowiak. Marta is attorney at law and will be present the law background of starting business in Poland. And last not least is Anna Stankiewicz. Anna is proxy and director of external accounting, and she will present accounting aspects of doing business in Poland. So 1 second, I will give the voice to.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for joining our webinar today. As Agnieszka mentioned, my name is Marta Juskowiak, and I'm an attorney at law, cooperating with PKF in Poland since 5 years now. My main area of expertise is legal assistance in corporate law, and the favorite piece of my job is cooperating with international clients, assisting them in opening and running their business in Poland. Therefore, I'll have a pleasure to present you with the legal background of starting business in Poland. The points that I'd like to cover today are first, a general overview of the forms of business available in Poland, then some more detailed information about the most frequently chosen type of legal entity in Poland, which is the limited liability company, and the procedure of its establishment. I will also share some practical information about the current epidemic situation in Poland in the context of opening business by foreign investors. I'd like to also share some very basic information about employment in Poland at the end. Moving now on to our presentation. On the first slide, you can see a list of forms of business available in Poland currently. As you can see, they have been divided into 3 groups. So we have partnerships, companies, and others. The main practical difference between partnerships and companies under Polish jurisdiction is the limited liability of shareholders, which only concerns companies. The companies are legal persons, separate from their shareholders, and as a rule, the owners cannot be held liable for the company's debts. The form of business which is the most frequently chosen in Poland is the limited liability company. Actually, according to the official statistics, as at the end of 2019, there were 1,296,000 partnerships and companies registered in Poland, and almost 430,000 of them were the LLCs, which is around 1/3 of the total number. So a lot, a big part of it. And because of that popularity, we prepared a separate part referring to this type of company only, which I will move on to soon. As you can see on the slide, there are 3 companies listed. We used to have only 2 types of companies under Polish Commercial Companies Code, the limited liability company and the joint stock company. However, starting from the 1st of July this year, a new form of company is going to be available, which is a simple joint stock company. I will also talk more about it in a minute, but before that, I would like to draw your attention to the 3rd group, which is others. Here you can see the sole proprietorship, which is basically a business run by a natural person individually. It is a form quite popular in Poland, however, mainly for small businesses and self-employment. The foreign investors thinking about starting their business in Poland should definitely remember about the form of a branch or a representative office. These are the forms that do not lead to creation any new legal entity on the Polish market. Both the representative office and the branch are just a part of the foreign entity. Therefore, any legal and tax consequences of doing business in Poland directly concern the foreign entity itself. What is more, the scope of business activity for these firms is limited. The branch may only take up business in the exact same scope as the foreign entity. And the representative office, on the other hand, may only promote the business run by the foreign entity. So let's move to the next slide. As I mentioned before, starting from the 1st of July 2021, a new form of business will become available in Poland. And this is the simple joint stock company. Well, obviously, we don't have any practice with this type of business yet, so it is definitely too soon to decide whether it's worth recommending. But we need to mention that the lawmaker designed it with a view of the startups, and in particular, operating in the new technologies industry. What is the most interesting, in my opinion, is that the minimum capital needed for establishment of this company is only 1 PLN. And what's more, it will be possible to contribute work and services to that company, unlike in the case of other companies. Also, the day-to-day operations of this company are supposed to be simple, thanks to the possibility to adopt shareholders' resolutions online. Now let's briefly talk about how to choose the appropriate form of business from among all these possibilities. Well, first, the choice should be dependent upon the country of residence of the investor or shareholder. As you can see on the slide, the entities or individuals from the European Union member states and the member states of the European Economic Area may undertake and pursue economic activity in Poland on the very same principles as Polish citizens. This means that all of the forms of business available for Polish citizens may also be chosen by the EU citizens. Then you can see that the entities or individuals from other countries may take up and pursue economic activity in Poland on the same principles as Polish citizens under certain conditions, or only in some specific forms. The first point concerns natural persons, and it lets them take up and pursue activity if having an appropriate permanent residence permit or other kinds of residence permits. While the second concerns both legal entities and natural persons. And it says that only some limited kinds of business activity are available to them. Now turning to other more practical criteria of choice. When deciding on the appropriate business form in Poland, you should, of course, first take into consideration if a specific form is dedicated for the scope of business you wish to undertake. However, this is rather a rare situation. On the other hand, the issue which is much more important is to select the form of business suitable to the size of the business and the business model in general. For example, a joint stock company can be appropriate if you wish to look for outside investors or go public, for example. And that completes the overview of the forms of business available in Poland and leads us to talking more about the limited liability company. As already mentioned, this is the most common form of business in Poland, which also refers to the choices made by our PKF foreign clients. Okay, as you can see on the slide here, the LLC is a legal person separate from its shareholders, and the shareholders are not liable personally for the company's debts. The minimum share capital is 5,000 PLN, and it can be covered by cash or in-kind contributions. It is maybe worth mentioning that it is possible to open a single shareholder company. Every LLC needs a management board, which is composed of natural persons, minimum one. The management board is responsible for representation of the company as well as for internal management. It is required to appoint a supervisory board only if the share capital exceeds 500,000 PLN and there are more than 25 shareholders. So usually most of the LLCs does not have the supervisory board in practice. There are two ways of establishment of an LLC in Poland. First, a so-called traditional method and an internet method. The traditional method involves signing the articles of association before a notary public in the form of a notarial deed and submitting an application for registration of the company in the National Court Register in a paper form. When choosing the internet method, both the articles of association and the application for registration of the company are signed and submitted to the National Court Register online. Okay, so now let's look at the costs of establishment of an LLC, which are relatively low. The court fees should not exceed 500 PLN. However, both the notarial fees and the civil law transaction tax depend on the share capital amount. As you can see, the internet method of establishment enables to save on the notarial fees. So now coming back to the comparison of the internet and traditional method of establishment, you should note that the main advantage of the simple internet method is the time saving. While the traditional registration usually takes a month or so, the National Court Register should register the company set up via internet system within just one business day. Unfortunately, in practice, it usually takes a little more, usually up to 3 business days. You should note that the matter of time may be of some importance while deciding on the method of establishment. However, It's important to know that in practice, the registration in the National Court Register is the moment when the company is created, but it's not the end of the whole process. So after the company's registration, it is also usually necessary to register the company for VAT, Social Security, or open a bank account. These formalities also take some time, which is, of course, independent of the method of establishment. Next, we come to some more details regarding the LLC establishment in the online procedure. So apart from the time saving in the process of registration, another advantage is that the whole procedure of registration may be done online without visiting the notary public office. However, in order to use the internet system and sign the documents online, it is necessary to obtain a qualified e-signature or an entrusted profile first. It is then used to sign the articles of association as well as the application for registration of the company. Another point worth mentioning is that when setting up an LLC online, you can only use a very simple template of the company's agreement. For example, it only enables for cash contributions, and the financial year must be equal to calendar year. The shareholders may amend the articles of association afterwards before a notary public just anytime they want. So these were the most important points regarding the limited liability company that I wanted to share with you today. And this leads us to the last point regarding legal aspects of opening business in Poland, which is the current COVID-19 situation and its impact on starting business. So currently most of business remains open. However, there are numerous sanitary regimes that you need to obey. Polish government just recently opened the most suffering branches, such as hotels and restaurants. Also, trade fairs, business conferences, and other bigger gatherings are also acceptable now. Investors coming to Poland should, however, monitor the requirements regarding quarantine and COVID-19 testing connected with crossing the border. These frequently change. Currently, all travelers are subject to quarantine. However, they can be exempt from it if a COVID-19 test done within 48 hours from arrival is negative. Also, the travelers coming from the Schengen zone can also present a negative test done before the arrival. But beware, the tests done outside of the Schengen zone are not accepted. They do not exempt from the quarantine currently. Now I would just like to note that due to the epidemic and all the hardship connected with traveling, the possibility of setting up a company or a partnership in an online procedure may be very practical and definitely worth considering nowadays. Last but not least, let's make a transition and introduce some very basic information about employment in Poland. So the most common and basic form of employment is the employment contract, regulated by the Labor Code. Usually, it is the form of employment preferred by the employees as it ensures numerous benefits, such as paid holidays, strictly regulated maximum working time, minimum wage, or wide protection against dismissal. There are also other forms of employment, specifically based on civil law contracts. The costs of such employment are lower in terms of social security contributions, and therefore the government tends to limit the possibility to use them as the basis for employment. In certain branches, here are the types of civil law contracts used for employment. In certain branches, self-employment is also common, which is very often also connected with tax and social security preferences. Due to tax and social security related risks, It is very important to be cautious and reasonable when deciding on the form of employment and adjust it properly both to the subject of duties and to the employment conditions, such as time and place of work. Yes, and this was the last point I wanted to talk about today. I hope that despite the short time of presentation, I was able to cover the crucial issues and show some directions to follow if you or your clients decide to open a business in Poland. Thank you very much for your attention during this part. And now I would like to give the floor back to Agnieszka, who will cover the tax part of our presentation in just a few seconds. Thank you.
Hello again. Okay, let's talk in a few words about the tax system in Poland. As you know, since the early 90s of the 20th century, the Polish tax system has been developing gradually. Of course, the main purpose was to encourage foreign investors to invest in Poland, and as a consequence, to create new places of employment. To gain it, the corporate income tax was reduced from 40% to 19%. Currently, the income tax rate for a new company, which is starting activity in Poland, and for a small entity, it's only 9%. The next big reform of the tax system was determined adaptation of the Polish law to the law of the European Union. As a consequence, the Polish tax law was harmonized and coordinated in the same parts with EU tax law. As you may be heard, we just before the next big tax reform, it's connected with current situation, pandemic situation, and a few weeks ago, the government announced so-called Polski Ład, let's say Polish order, which will be introduced in new regulations concerning the taxation. I think that it will be the topic for the next next webinar. Because at this moment it's a very general information before announcement of details act. So we will see what will be the final vision, let's say, of this reform. Okay, a few words about the taxes. So Polish tax system includes 17 types of taxes. The main of these are indirect taxes, so it's a corporate income tax, personal income tax, also real estate tax, tax on means of transport, civil law taxation tax, and also direct taxes, which is VAT and excise duty. Of course, in Poland, the legal system is based on the statute law, acts, regulations, but in practice, a tax ruling, which is issued by Ministry of Finance and Director of the National Tax Information, but also jurisdiction of administrative courts, especially the Supreme Administrative Court, have a significant position in Polish law, Polish tax law application. And because we have a very limited time for our webinar, I would like to draw your attention to the main tax regulations. First one will be corporate income tax, next personal income tax, and at the end, a few words about the VAT in Poland. Okay, let's start with the corporate income tax. On these sides, you see the taxpayers. Taxpayers are legal persons. I mean the limited liability company, joint stock company. In the future, as Marta said, it will be the simple joint stock company, but also the other legal entity like a foundation, association, state agency. The taxpayers in Polish corporate income tax is also the few types of partnership. It's a limited joint stock partnerships. These type of partnerships have been corporate income tax taxpayers since 2014. And limited partnership, it's a new regulations because these partnerships become a taxpayer as a result of changes introduced from January 1st, 2021. Of course, you have to know that according to the commercial law regulation, both above-mentioned type of partnership are not recognized as a legal person. It's a partnership. Also, in certain situations, also the general partnership could be also the taxpayer of corporate income tax. It concerns also these partnerships whose partners are not only natural persons. You have to know that CIT taxpayers are also foreign entrepreneurs, companies conducting activity within the framework of a branch in Poland, but of course with regard to income generated in Poland. Okay, a few words about the tax rates. The standard tax rates in corporate income tax is 19%. As I mentioned, in 2017, tax rate from small taxpayer was reduced in first step from 19% to 15%. Currently, this tax rate was reduced to 9%. The lower corporate tax rate will be applied by small taxpayers whose value of sales revenue, including the amount of tax payable on goods and services, are not exceed in the previous fiscal year equivalent of 2 million euro. This solution, I mean this tax rate 9%, is also affect taxpayer who start ups his business in Poland. In 2021, to corporate income tax was introduced so-called Estonian tax. Such taxation means that the business eligible for new form of taxation would have to pay only for the part of income that is paid out to the shareholders, like dividends, but not only. Unfortunately, Estonian tax is directed at small and medium joint stock and limited companies with an income below or even 100 million Polish zloty, but also including VAT. Of course, to take advantage for this form of taxation, the companies, but also the shareholders have to meet certain criteria. It's a rather long list. So before decision to choose such form of taxation, it should be very deeply verified and analyzed if it will be really profitable form of taxation for the future business activity. About a few words about the sources, tax sources. Taxable base is the sum of income earned from two sources, capital gains and income derived from the other source of revenue. Of course, apart income from share capital transaction, I mean, for example, transaction concerning the paying dividends, receiving dividends, or income for paying shares or stocks. The capital gains includes also royalties, license fee, and similar rights. What is important, taxpayers are obliged to recognize revenues and costs related to each source separately. It means that accounting system should allow us to present an amount of income and the cost connected with the capital gains, and separately with other activity. How to calculate the tax? Of course, the basis is net profit shown on the respective yearly balance sheet, calculated in accordance with the statutory accounting and bookkeeping rules, after adjustments for deductions and additions provided under the tax law. Of course, generally, expenses incurred for the productions of income are allowed as deductions. However, you have to know that Polish CIT Act unfortunately includes also the long list. It's about the 70 position costs, which are not deductible. A few words about the losses. Losses must be considered within individual source of revenue. It's also very important, and new regulations since 2018. And taxpayer may choose two forms. The first, the main, is a loss carry forward system. It means that we can offset a loss within the given source of 5 sequent tax years, provided that the amount of deducted in any 1 year cannot exceed 50% of loss incurred. Or reduce income earned from each source of revenue once by the amount of the loss not exceeding 5 million Polish zloty in one of the sequent 5 tax year. The non-deductible amounts is subject to settlement in the remaining years of the 5-year period, and the amount of deduction in any of these years may not exceed 50% of loss. Regarding the corporate income tax, we have specific regulations. I mean, it's a regulation concerning, let's say, kind of additional tax within the corporate income tax. It's concerned on income from real estate. As I mentioned, it's a new regulation introduced to Polish tax system since to corporate income tax since January 1st, 2018. And this tax is calculated on revenues from buildings, and it applies to all buildings, regardless of classification. It means that it could be applied for shopping malls, hotels, multi-stores, storage car parks, halls, warehouse, etc. But which generate income from lease, tenancy, or other similar contract. So it means that you have, for example, halls, but you will use these halls only for the production. These halls will not be the subject of this taxation, but if you receive the incomes for lease these halls, it will be these halls will be taxable. What is important? It concerns the real estate which has initial value over 10 million Polish zloty, and they are owned or jointly owned by the taxpayer. And under condition, the total usable floor area let for use exceed 5% of total usable floor area of the buildings. This is a very specific form of calculations, because the taxable base is the initial value of the fixed asset determined on the first day of each month, resulting from the records maintained. The tax amounts is 0.035% of the taxable base for each month. However, Currently, due to the ongoing pandemic, the exemption from this tax has been introduced, and it is valid until the end of pandemic. Next slide, it's a short information about the withholding tax. It's also very important for the foreign investors because the dividends, interests, some income from intangible services could be or will be the subject of withholding tax in Poland. As you see, we have three groups of income sources which are subject to this taxation. The first group is interest, copyrights, and related rights, right to inventive designs, trademarks, etc. The tax rate is the general tax rate on this is 20%. Next group is a remuneration for some intangible services like advisory, accounting, legal, advertisement, management. So these kind of services, which is a very typical, let's say, between the related parties, and the tax rate is 20%. And the last group is it's a dividends and other revenue arising from the share in the profits of legal person. However, of course, dividend distribution by resident subsidiaries to the non-resident EU partners cannot be exempted. But in general, tax rate for tax VHT on dividends, it's 19%. However, above mentioned tax rates may be reduced to 5, 10, or 15%. Or even eliminated under the provision of the double tax treaty if certain conditions are met. One of these general conditions will have to be met. It's an obligation to possess a certificate of residency, which confirms that income receiver has its unlimited tax obligation in other country. A few words about the exemption in these regulations. We have two groups of exemption. First one for dividends. And dividends, as I mentioned, is qualified for an exemptions under EU Parent Subsidiary Directive, which was implemented to the Polish tax system. In order to benefit from these regulations, these specific conditions presented on the slide must be met. And the entity interested to make use of this exemption should additionally submit a current certificate of tax residency or a document of existence of foreign permanent establishment. The obligation to submit current certificate of residency does not apply to companies resident in Polish territory. And additionally, written statement of not being benefits from exemption from income tax on the entire income, regardless of where it's earned. The similar exemptions also exist and concerning the royalties and interests. The rate of withholding tax on this income can be reduced under the tax treaty or EU tax treaty or the EU interest and royalties directive, which also has been implemented to the Polish tax system. In order to benefit from these regulations, you see the list of specific conditions, and of course I should met that if we would like to use this exemption. Also, in this case, of course, achievement of certificate of residency will be obligatory. Another aspect which is very important for the foreign investors, it's obligations concerning transfer pricing. Because it's a typical situation that Polish company which possess the foreign shareholder provides kind of transaction with the related parties in different countries. So in such situation, taxpayers who provide such transactions with related entities would have obligation to prepare a transfer pricing documentation. However, the scope of these obligations depends on value of transaction, but also depends on value of revenues of whole capitals groups, because the tax transfer pricing documentation would include sometimes only the, let's say, local file, but sometimes also the master file. So in this situation, it depends on the value of revenues of whole capital groups. Regarding the local file, the value of transaction has an impact on our obligations concerning to preparations of local file. So the value of the thresholds in the fiscal years is follow. So as you see, it's 10 million Polish zloty in case of goods and financial transaction, and 2 million Polish zloty in case of service and other transactions. Okay, that's all regarding the corporate income tax. Now a few words about the personal income tax. When we talk about the personal income tax, we have to remember about the scope of, let's say, tax obligation, because we have on one hand we have unlimited tax obligation in Poland. It concerns the Polish. It concerns individuals with a place of residence in Poland, and individuals who do not have a place of residence in Poland are taxed solely on income earned in Poland. It means they have limited tax obligation in Poland. The Polish resident taxpayer is also a natural person who has a place of residency within the territory of Poland. I mean, stay on the territory of Poland longer than 183 days during the tax year, or have a center of personal or economic interest on the territory of Poland. Of course, the above rules are applied taking into account the provision of relevant tax treaties, double tax treaties. Therefore, even if in the light of Polish national legislation, a person possesses the residence test for Poland, the appropriate criteria contained in the international treaty must be applied to determine what country is the person's actual place of residence for tax purposes. Rates and taxpayers. As a general rule, natural persons in Poland are subject to income tax calculated in accordance with progressive tax scales, with income thresholds 17% and 22%. So if the tax base in PLN is up to 85,000 Polish zloty, the tax rate is 17%. For tax bases between the 85,000 Polish zloty to 1 million, these rates will be 32%. Over the 1 million, we have the same rates, I mean the 32%. However, we have to pay also additionally 4% solidarity surcharge. The tax reducing amount depends on the value of taxable base. For example, for the tax base not exceeding a very small amount, it's 8,000 Polish zloty. It will be 1,440 Polish zloty. But for the tax base exceeding the 127,000 Polish zloty, this amount is equal 0. According to this announcement concerning the Polish order, the tax reducing amount will be much higher and will be equal 30,000 Polish zloty. It is let's say equivalent about the 8,000 euro. However, natural person who conduct individual business activity or business activity as a partner of professional partnership or general partnership or civil partnerships can choose flat rate taxation with a flat tax rate 19%. And of course, additionally, some categories of income revenues are subject to the taxation in accordance with separate regulations. These are, among others, income revenues derived from private tenancy. At the taxpayer request, it's 8.5% on registered income without deductible cost, up to the amount of 100,000 Polish zloty. On the surplus above this amount, the tax on registered income without the deductible cost amounts to 12.5% of revenues. For other sources, for example, for dividends, it's 19% flat tax. Interest and savings, also 19%. Gains from the sales of securities is also 19%. Sales of private property in principle is 19%. However, in some cases also exists exemption. For example, when you decided to sell your real estate after 5 years of possessing, it will be excluded from the taxation. And a few words about this solidarity tax. As you remember, a few slides ago, I showed that when you achieve the highest annual income, sometimes can appear additional taxation. It's a solidarity tax. The taxation base is the amount of taxable income surplus over the 1 million Polish zloty. This tax is levied on income from employment and other income source taxable at the tax scale. Business, also this kind of business where is taxable at the flat rate 19%, and certain income from the capital gains, except dividends and interest income. The tax rate is 4%. When we talk about the personal income tax, we also have to say a few words about the social and health security contributions. Poland's social security system comprises retirement and disability insurance, accidents insurance, illness insurance, and health insurance. On this slide, you see the rates and who is responsible for the paying. I mean that this percentage, which is shown as a part of employer, it means that this amount is deducted for this part by employer, but this part connected with the employee is directly deducted from the remunerations of employee. So part of these rates is, let's say, additionally payable by the employer. I'm sorry. Insurance cover, among others, employees and self-employed and contractors. Mandatory contributions on employer and employee sides in force in 2020 is exactly on this slide. Okay, the last type of taxation during our webinar, a few words about the VAT. VAT, as a result of Poland's accession to the European Union, the Polish VAT Act has changed in line with regulations of EU directives related to the VAT. There is a standard list of transactions taxable in VAT. I mean, it's a supply of goods and services made in Poland, exports of goods outside of EU, imports of goods from outside the EU, intra-community acquisition, and intra-community supplies of goods. Entities that wish to conduct activities subject to VAT in Poland must file a registration form before the date of the first taxable activity. The annual sales that do not exceed 200,000 Polish zloty are exempt from VAT. However, a taxpayer may choose to pay the tax on the sales upon prior notification to the tax authority. In order to register for VAT purposes in Poland, entities without a registered office, permanent place of residence, or place of business in European Union, it is important, must appoint tax representatives. So it means when appear obligation, for example, for German company to register for VAT in Poland, in such situation, these entities not need a tax representative in Poland, but in the situation when it is a company, for example, from USA, such obligation to possess the tax representatives will appear. About the tax rates in VAT, VAT is charged at the standard tax rates of 23% on the supplies of most goods and services, or at the reduced rates 8, 5, or 0. As you see, 8% supplies include, amongst others, hotel services, passenger transport supply, construction and some assembly services, restoration and conservation of buildings. 5% rates apply to the certain foods, I mean the meats, fish, dairy products, vegetables, fruits, bread, etc. 0% supplies include, among others, export and intra-community supplies of goods and international transport services. Of course, in addition, there are a number of exemptions from VAT, including the education and healthcare services. A few words about the obligation and the communication, let's say, with the tax authority. You have to know that exchange of all information and declaration with the tax offices is providing in electronical way. From 1st July 2018, all enterprises are obliged to transmit data in unified form, so-called standard audit file, along with VAT returns monthly at the request of tax authorities. And from 1st October 2020, taxpayers are not longer required to submit a VAT declaration separately. It means that from this period, from October 1st, 2020, it is not possible to submit monthly or quarterly declarations in a different way than through the CIT, so this GPK, this specific electronic way. This new CIT files includes a set of information about the purchases and sales which result from the VAT records for a given period, items from the current VAT returns, and additional data needed to analyze the correctness of the settlements. That's all information about these main types of taxes. Currently, a few slides, few information about the specific tax incentives to encourage foreign investor to invest in Poland. As you see, the most important and the most important tax incentives is Polish economic zones. It's a R&D incentive and also IP box incentives. The first one, the Polish economic zones, it's a new regulations because for the last 20 years in Poland exists 13 special economic zones, and companies operating within the special economic zones may enjoy tax holidays which involve tax exemption from corporate tax within the certain time limits. Since 2018, on the basis of new legal regulations, the tax exemption is now available across the entire territory of Poland for companies carrying out new investments on publicly as well as privately owned land. However, at the same time, the currently binding social economic zones permits already granted to investor within the old special economic zones shall remain in force until 2026. The income tax exemption limits is calculated as a percentage of costs of new investments or the 2-year cost of hiring new employees. The percentage of public aid depends on the size of the entrepreneur and the chosen locations of the investment. It is possible to recover up to 70% of incurred cost. This percentage is different in different localization in Poland, and the reduced tax can be used for up to 15 years until the exception limit is used. So, as you see, it is very important to verify which region of Poland can give us the biggest possibilities to reduce taxation in Poland. Another tax incentives is incentives concerning R&D activities. Poland has already established itself as a popular destination for R&D centers of many global leaders in key high-tech industries. Since 1st January 2019, Poland's offered plenty of support instruments for investors conducting R&D activities. For example, R&D tax relief mentioned innovation box, so-called IP box, but also the government R&D grants, but also the several programs co-financed with EU funds. Regarding R&D incentives in corporate income tax, the entitled taxpayers to make additional deduction of expenditure related to R&D activities from the tax base. This deduction is up to 150%. Of course, it concerns to the all costs, but it concerns to the specific list of costs directly connected with the R&D activities, and among others, it includes the remuneration of employees in the part related to the R&D activity, and connected with that social security contributions. But also purchase of specialist equipment, materials, raw materials, what else? The certain expert opinions, consultancy and equivalent services, but also the cost of obtaining and maintaining the patents, rights of protection for utility model, and right from registration of an industrial design. And the last not least, tax incentives is IP box, intellectual incentives connected with the qualified intellectual property rights. IP box existing tax preference system. Poland's innovation box complements the existing tax preference system for innovative activities and introduce a preferential 5% tax rate of qualified income from qualifying intellectual property rights, instead mentioned at 19% tax rate. The Polish intellectual property rights catalog is, I think it's one of the broadest worldwide, and reduced 5% tax rate is one of the lowest of all developed countries. The list of these qualified IP rights are in particular a patent, an utility model, an industrial design, copyright to a computer program. Okay, so that's it when it comes to general information about the tax system in Poland. We will now move to the part related to the accounting aspect of operating in Poland. Our next expert, Anna Stankiewicz, will present you the law background of present you accounting background of starting business in Poland.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Stankiewicz. I'm accounting director in PKF Poland since 5 years now. My main area of expertise is provide books, payroll, and personal services for Polish and international clients. Bookkeeping in Poland. First of all, ledgers should be written in Polish language, in Polish currency, and of course, regarding with Polish tax and accounting regulations. Accounting policy is obligatory for all companies. Based on this policy, we are able to see general accounting rules in company. Also, preparing and submitting annual financial statement is obligatory for all companies. The company is obliged to prepare financial statement lately 3 months after the balance sheet date and submit it lately 6 months after that date. Please note that the head of the entity has full responsibility for correctness and completeness books, and for preparing the financial statement, and of course for signing and sending to the National Court Register. Financial statement requirements. The financial statement should be signed using electronic signature by person who is responsible for books and by all members of management board. Then the financial statement could be submitted. Nowadays, the financial statement should be sent to the National Court Register in digital form in a special XML logical structure specified by the Ministry of Finance. Some entities are required to have financial statements audited by a statutory auditor. Its companies where data for previous financial year exceed the following three below thresholds. The first one, the average annual numbers of employees is at least 50 people. The second one, the value of assets exceed 2.5 million euro. And the last one, revenues exceed 5 million euro. The next slide. In case of listed companies, the reporting could be quarterly, semi-annual, and annual. Okay. Personal and payroll in Poland. What we need to know about payroll and human resources services in Poland. The most basic thing is that we have three types of contract with your future employee: normal work contract, civil contract, and B2B contract. And depending on the type of contract, you will need to pay lower, high, or no taxes and social security contributions. Moreover, please remember that employees could have even 3 months agreement termination period. It's very important to know. Before your potential employee will start actual work, they need to do medical examination and health and safety trainings. Please remember that in PKF we have specialists who can support you during preparing all those things, especially with putting all papers together and submitting all necessary forms to the government institution, like social insurance institution or tax office. Payroll services. Like you see in this slide, standard payroll and personal services should include taking care of employment documentation, including administrating all regular agreements and civil law contracts, calculating the days off, thinking about necessary trainings for employees, and preparing necessary documentation also for employee. Additional, calculating remuneration, including transfers, taking care of all employee information that are transferred to social insurance institution, representation before tax and other institutional authorities. Is there anything more what you need? I hope that yes. Management accounting, which is a link between financial and operation part of your business. I can say that it's worth thinking about introduction of controlling even in small companies. I have seen so many times how surprised people when they saw data that they knew by heart, at least they thought they do. Unfortunately, times that we have right now showed us that we need proper information on time to make the right decisions. In your company, you might need also somebody who will tell you how to read those data. Why? Because right now, the biggest problem is to understand these numbers and has ability to analyze and compare it. In this slide, you can see what you should expect from that kind of services. Of course, very important are also tools like electronic workflows, fast and easy access to data, elimination of duplicate work, transparency, increased efficiency. These points show us how to obtain accurate data faster and easier. Only the newest programs and applications allow to keep track in the changing reality, which was especially shown last year. For our last part, let's welcome back Agnieszka.
It's all information which we have prepared for you during our webinar. I hope that our webinar was the opportunity to collect a lot of information for the future I hope investor in Poland, because I see that we have a few questions. One of them is technical, where I can fill in the survey. Please put the bottom survey on the top of the screen, red button, and then you can fill the survey. Okay, some questions. Some questions concerning the topic, how to obtain an electronic signature which is needed to open a company in online procedure. Marta?
Yes, so thank you for this question. This is, I believe, my part of presentation. Well, actually in Poland there are several service providers where you can buy such a qualified electronic signature. Like an average cost of that is around 300 PLN for 2 years. It's usually valid for 2 years. What's important is that not each, but some of the service providers enable to buy such a signature without personal presence in the office in Poland. So you can just order it online and send back the papers, so you can get it from wherever you are at the moment.
Okay, Marta, the next question, I think it's also to you. What is the current minimum wage in Poland?
The current minimum wage for a full-time is 2,800 PLN. This is the gross number. And I think it gives like the total cost for the employer, it's around 3,400 PLN. Some number around that.
Okay, the next questions concerning taxation. Are there any differences in the taxation of a branch of a foreign company and a separate limited liability company in Poland? Well, you have to remember that, of course, the branch of the foreign company, it's a not separate entity from the tax perspective. It's the same entity, like as the same entity, so like the center, the main entity. So it means that, for example, for the VAT purposes, all transactions between the mother company and the branch are recognized as internal transactions, so they are not subject to VAT. From the perspective of corporate income tax, of course, as I mentioned during my presentation, the branch is also the corporate income. It's a taxpayer of the corporate income tax. And they pay CIT-tax only on income generated in Poland. It means that we have no payment, which we so-called, let's say, dividends, because it's the same entity. So we will not appear the withholding tax on the transaction between the mother company and the branch. However, what is important, the transaction between the branch and the main entity could be the subject for the transfer pricing, because it's a transaction which will be payable in the different localizations in different territories. So it could be also the subject to verification regarding the market value of these settlements. The next questions from Valdemar. In terms of opening up a bank account for a company, can this be done remotely or in personal only? In our experience, it's possible only in personal only. It was a real problem, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. We have a few situations, for example, for investors from India, and they not able to travel to Poland, and it was the real serious problem to start business because of this opening of bank account. It's a special procedure connecting with achievement of special signature, which should be done personally. Additionally, we have very strict regulations concerning the anti-money laundering. So it's as a result of that, the opening of bank account is possible only in traditional way, so personally. And the other questions. Do you provide services regarding the selection of the place, location in Poland for the planned start of business? Yes, sure, of course. It's a part of our business. Our consulting department specialized in such services. They analyzed what is the main goal, what kind of business the investor would like to provide. And on the basis of that, taking into account also these tax incentives connected with this region in Poland, we prepare kind of list of recommendation which region could be the best solution for this type of business. Okay. I think that's.
And maybe in the end, I would like to give you advice about agreement for rent the office. Is very important. It should be one of the first agreement which you should sign. So please remember about this.
All right. I think that's all questions. I think so. Okay.
It's also about the presentation.
The presentation. Yes, the presentation, of course, will be available for this person who decided to to fill our survey. So I would like to ask you to put this information, and of course, we will receive these materials. No problem. Okay, so thank you very much for the participating in our webinar. Feel free to contact us. We provide comprehensive and professional support at every stage of business activity in Poland. As you see, we can support you in all aspects: tax, legal, accounting. We are open for new cooperation with new clients, and I hope new investors in Poland. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.